PC Radio. I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
Joe, it's time to go, go, go. You're just so status quo. Both friend and foe know you're a no-go, Joe.
Come on, man.
The PC Radio Show with Stu and Rich.
It's Casual Friday. I see that you're over there in your t-shirt. I'm here in my hoodie and my hat. It's, the tie had to come off today. I can't take it anymore, man. It's, by about noontime, that thing, I either want to tie it up super tight and jump off of a bridge somewhere, or throw it in a trash can, much like a postal worker did near Milwaukee. I don't know if you've seen that. We're going to get to that here later in the show, but now postal employees that we're supposed to trust with mail-in ballots are throwing mail in the trash. I don't know if that's what was in there, Rich, if it was mail-in ballots, or if it was just that this person didn't want to do their job. But we're going to get to that. First, we want to talk about this, though. As you probably saw over the weekend or late last week, or earlier in this week, Nancy Pelosi, here she is in the salon. And I don't know what this wobble is that she's doing here, but when you look at this surveillance footage, Rich, she looks like a damn criminal. I mean, she's sneaking around. She's got that, here it is in slow motion. She's got this, oh my God, I know what I'm doing is wrong. And here's the woman who she stands behind a podium. She's the most powerful woman in the United States, the most powerful female actually in the world. And she stands behind the podium of the Speaker of the House of the United States of America, and she talks about, bless you, and she talks about how everybody must wear a mask and there's no going out. She's the one that has made it impossible for anybody to work in the state of California. And here she is going into a salon where she's not supposed to be. In California, they're supposed to be outdoors when they're getting their hair did. And here she is getting her hair blowed out, Rich.
Yeah. Double standards all over again.
Rules for thee, but not for me. Exactly. Yeah. And then she obviously hits the airwaves with a statement afterwards, and here's what Nancy had to say.
I've been there over the years. I've been there many times. I appreciate the question, and let me just say this. Mm-hmm. I take responsibility for trusting the word of a neighborhood salon that I've been to over the years many times, and that when they said, well, we're able to accommodate people one person at a time, and that we can set up that time, I trusted that. As it turns out, it was a setup. So I take responsibility for falling for a setup. And that's all I'm going to say on that. I think that that this salon owes me an apology for setting up. But I will say this.
Are you kidding me? She says the salon owes her an apology for setting her up. You were sneaking around in here without your mask on in a place where you know that you're not supposed to be. These are the people, these liberal, progressive radicals, these are the people who preach to you and I, Richard, that we're entitled and that we have privilege. This is the very definition of entitlement and privilege. The owner of the salon was pissed off and was later quoted saying something, and I'm paraphrasing, but something similar to, she was really upset and angry. So what happens is, the owner of the salon she rents out some of her chairs. She was at home. She's not allowed to be in the salon because of, ordinances and COVID-19 restrictions in the state of California. She's not allowed to go to work herself. So that when she later looked at surveillance footage and saw Nancy in here sneaking around, she was very upset. She was upset because of the fact that this entitlement, this privilege right here, is what allows for Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, to sneak into her salon, but she can't even go to work herself. Unbelievable.
She's apologizing for falling for the fact that somebody said, "Hey, come on in. Nobody will find out. Yeah, and we're gonna break the rules. We'll do whatever we want, but trust me, everything will be good." And they got her. So good.
And
good.
She said that they told her that they could accommodate one at a time. Well, it doesn't matter.
She knows that's crap.
Exactly, because she knows the law. She's the one who had a hand in creating.
She made it.
In penciling this law. And then she says that the salon owes her an apology. Nancy, you are very special. This is what I'm asking people. How can you cast a vote for Joe Biden, who's been her cohort for so long and is part of this establishment who's been in elected office as an elected representative for 47 years. 47 years. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, okay? There's some things about the deep state that, I think are true. I don't throw the word around very often or the phrase deep state around very often, but establishment for sure. She's the definition of establishment. So is Joe Biden. So is Kamala Harris. We're going to get to her in a second, but before we do, Rich, I want to take you to this. This is a Milwaukee postal worker who was busted dumping trash right out of the mail carrier box, dumping mail into a dumpster near Milwaukee. Now, this postal employee has since been fired, I believe, or suspended without pay. I've read it both ways. Either one, the postal worker obviously ought to be fired. But Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and everybody over there, these extremist radical progressives that have hijacked the Democratic Party, want us to trust this person right here that we're viewing on the screen, we're watching, and for those of you listening on iHeartRadio, Mojo 50, welcome to the program. You can't see this. If you're watching us in the OpsLens app or on social media, you can see what we're showing here. But this is a postal employee. She's got her van parked right there, and she brings out the plastic tub of mail. She walks right over to the dumpster, lifts up the dumpster lid, and just tosses the whole thing in there. And these people, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, they're the ones that are telling us that they want us to trust this very organization with mail-in ballots. I think I lost you, Rich.
Hello?
Oh, there you are. You're back. Okay. More technical difficulties as intern boy is here trying to get this stuff together. This is the very organization that they want us to trust with our mail and with mail-in ballots. If you won, and I've seen this going around on social media before, but if you won $1 million in the lottery and a scratch-off, would you bring it there yourself, or would you give it to this lady right here to mail in to collect your $1 million? It's just absolutely unprecedented. Speaking of Kamala Harris, she was on with that kook, Stephen Colbert, and Colbert was talking about peaceful protesters. Okay, we all know that those are the minority of people who are taking to the streets in America as destruction and carnage is just absolutely taking over. Police precincts are burning down. In one city, they actually tried to use cement to lock police officers inside of a building and then burn it down. These people have no problems burning the police alive. Literally. And this was a statement that Kamala Harris gave regarding these continued quote-unquote protests.
Stace, I'm just not seeing the reporting on it that I had
that's right.
for the first few weeks.
That's right. But they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop. And they're not, this is a movement, I'm telling you. They're not going to stop. And everyone beware, because they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And everyone should take note of that on both levels, that they're not going to let up, and they should.
This is a warning. It's basically a warning about terrorism taking place in the United States of America. They're not going to stop up until Election Day, and they're not going to stop after that. We've seen governors extending their unilateral authority across the country until the magical date of November 4th. Rich, you mentioned before the show that you thought that our state, Minnesota, was going to be next because you were watching Governor Walz on the news yesterday. These people, they don't even try to hide their criminal activity anymore. They don't, and the media is complicit in all of it. And here to talk with us about this more, he's a former cop with 20 years of law enforcement experience, whose mission is now to give a voice to police officers who can't speak out on their own, because we all know that cops don't have the First Amendment right, because chiefs are cowards and sheriffs are cowards and police command staffs are cowards across the country, bowing quite literally to criminal thugs in the street. This guy is the host of the he's the loudmouth host of the conservative talk show Coffee with Cops and the Thin Blue Line Show. He's not afraid to take on the radical left, just like us, Rich, and to try to keep them from running law enforcement forever into the ground. You can find him at coffeewithcopsshow.com and americaskeepers.com. Ray Dietrich, welcome to PC Radio. It's an honor to have you.
Hey, thanks for having me, Stu and Rich. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thanks for being here.
You heard Kamala Harris there. She's giving a warning. She's warning everybody. They're not going to stop. They're not going to let up. To her, Ray, what?
You know, it's an absolute endorsement of the violence and the rioting and the lawlessness and the assaults on the police officers for the last 100 days. The only time they've ever shifted their messaging was just a few days ago, and it has to be because of just horrible polling that they're scared. They're running scared now. But this entire messaging leading up into this has been, peaceful protesters. It's going to keep happening, and getting behind it as almost an endorsement. They refuse to even denounce Antifa at this point. Still to this day, they won't do it. It's an absolute just mess.
On Wednesday, during our show, I played some footage of a quote unquote peaceful protester who was delivering a speech from a stage in Washington, D.C. I don't know if you've seen that footage or not, Ray, but this man, and for those of you who didn't see the show on Wednesday, I feel sorry for you because we know that you're addicted to this damn thing, and if you missed it, it must have been for a good reason. But this guy is standing on stage with a microphone, and he's saying that he wants to burn the White House down. He wants to take it to the Senate and to Congress, and if they don't hear him, he's going to burn them down, and he'll bust a police officer in the head in Washington, D.C., just like he's had a history of busting cops in the head in New York. This is the message that's being delivered by these criminal thugs out here, and nobody from the progressive left is standing up and saying these people are criminals and they should be held accountable. The media is complicit in all of it too. How are people being duped when it's right out there in broad daylight for all of us to see, Ray?
It's absolutely insane. They're being duped because the regular media doesn't tell anything but their side of the story, their talking points. They get their DNC talking points. They go out there. And, I saw that protester you're speaking of talking about burning down the White House. He's not going to wait until the election to take action. These are common in the streets. These are common messages from the radical left, BLM, Antifa types in the streets. They will not dismiss them. They will not speak out against them. They're completely complicit in all of it. It's absolutely been endorsed by all of it. And then you see a good example of, with the Antifa guy killing the Patriot Prayer Trump supporter who was unarmed in Portland just a few days ago. If you look at the talking points from the media right now, it's not about the Antifa killer who did it. It's about the victim who was a radical right winger. Like, they can't even speak to the truth when it involves a murder at this point.
The thing that's interesting to me is that we've been talking about all this on our show for the last couple of weeks. Everybody's been talking about it on their show the last couple of weeks. And when is enough going to be enough? When are our elected officials going to actually, I don't know, for all intents and purposes, take the leash off of the law enforcement people and the military, whatever, to take our country back? Because it seems to me that very, very slowly, we're just losing. We're losing our country, and it's all out of, are these people scared to stand up to Antifa and Black Lives Matter and all this stuff? Is it money driven? Is it power driven? I think it's a little of all of it, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just beating a dead horse, but we just need to take our country back. And I think that if they don't do something soon, the folks who are those of us that just want to be left alone, as they say, are going to take it back ourselves. And it's really going to get ugly.
Yeah, and I think you're starting to see that. And there's some problems with that. There's a giant trap, in my opinion, that they're setting for President Trump, right? They want him to bring the Insurrection Act prior to the election. Mm-hmm. They want that optic because, look, violence isn't pretty. That's the problem we're having with all the police shootings. Violence is ugly. Business gets handled, and this is probably going to end post-election with the Insurrection Act, the Federalized National Guard, and even the regular military in the streets to put all of this down. I think they're trying to suck him into that. As badly as I want that now, I think the optics of it, I think it's the trap that they're setting for Trump to try to win the election because they have just such a terrible candidate this year.
On the phone with us right now is Ray Dietrich. He's a former cop with 20 years of law enforcement experience whose mission is now to give a voice to police officers who can't speak out on their own. He is the host of Coffee with Cops. You can find him at coffeewithcopsshow.com. Ray, excuse me for saying, but Coffee with Cops sounds cool and everything, but you know what I think would be a lot more fun? Would be like beers with a bounty hunter. And I don't know how that came to my attention. I don't know why I got to thinking that, but beers with a bounty hunter definitely sounds pretty cool.
We'll have to talk about that. That's a great idea. I think it might just go over really well.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't see anything going wrong on a show like that at all.
No, what's the worst that could happen? Right?
Exactly.
Oh boy.
We have people like Kamala Harris that are blatantly out here encouraging this to continue, and when police command staffs are in the streets, and highly decorated, promoted officers like sergeants and lieutenants are amongst these rioters, these criminal thugs who are in the street destroying cities. And to show them support, these cops in uniform are laying down on their face, laying down on their bellies with their hands behind their back, giving the optic that they are in full submission. It's been my quote, and it's been my saying and my thought that these cops better get used to that position, because this is the position that they're going to be executed in by the very same people that they're supporting now. We're giving power to these criminals. When are police command staffs going to step up, or are they not?
That's a great question. And what I saw in Minneapolis and even in Seattle with the CHOP zone absolutely disgusted me. Like, I feel, everyone wants to talk about Carmen Best in Seattle as being a hero now, because she sent out a letter and to the community basically saying, hey, we're being defunded, you're on your own. And taking a hard stance there. But she's also the one that allowed the Chaz and the CHOP zone, whatever you want to call it, to be taken over for weeks by these anarchists. And then you roll to the Minneapolis chief, who allowed on the first night after the George Floyd riots, their police station to be burned down. They abandoned it and drove away.
Right.
For me, I was a police sergeant or a sheriff sergeant. At some point, if you're in a point of leadership in a command spot like that in a larger department, any department, you have to be willing to lose your job to do the right thing. If you're doing the right thing, and you have some radical left governor, mayor, politician, whoever, trying to call the shots against law and order, and it comes down to allowing rioting to continue, or giving up ground, or getting your station burned down, or all of these things, then it's time to do it anyways and deal with the consequences. Now, I don't see that happening anytime soon. The problem is with these lefty cities running these police chiefs, like in Portland. Ted Wheeler is the self-appointed commissioner of police. They have no power in Portland because of this. I think you're going to need to see huge change. And I'm from the sheriff's department. I work two different LA County and Riverside County sheriffs in Southern California.
Okay.
I'm a huge proponent for elected officials running police agencies. And I think the sheriff model is much better than big city police at this point.
So let me ask you a question. Do you think that it's possible that eventually in our country, in some of these big cities like Portland, and maybe it's a conspiracy theory, or, it's way out in left field, but do you think that it's possible that the cops at some point are going to say, I've had enough, and they're going to mutiny against their own leadership and protect themselves by any means necessary? I mean, I think you can only tell people for so long, yep, please go out there in the middle of that street and get hit by rocks and urine bombs and just hold a shield and do nothing.
Right. I think the more likely scenario, because, no. And the reason is because our justice system has been infiltrated by radical DAs. And they're the ones, catching and release all the rioters, the bail reform. They're not filing charges. But if you're a police officer and you do anything wrong, you're going to get the book thrown at you. So they're put in an almost impossible situation. And I think what you're actually going to see is what's happening already. You're going to see lateral transfers out of these cities into, red zones where they feel more supported as officers. You're going to see people who can retire early leaving. You're going to see less people getting recruited in because nobody wants to work in these departments. And then the worst part's actually going to occur, which is the self-fulfilling prophecy that, they're going to have to hire with lower standards of people who don't want to be cops, and they're going to get cops that aren't as good as they have now. So they're basically creating a situation that's going to get worse. But yeah, the mutiny with these crazy DAs that run these places with all the issues, it's just, they would be hung out to dry and thrown in jail. So you're going to see them leaving early. There's tons of people already leaving these departments and going elsewhere. And the people who are going to suffer are the citizens who live there.
We're seeing a mass exodus of cops in Minneapolis. I think there were 100 that went again last week. And, this is the charter allows in Minneapolis for 888 cops. I think that we had just over 700 cops actually working at the time where George Floyd overdosed and died here in Minneapolis. And they're saying, so now I think we're up to about 200 who have officially PTSD'd out, and I don't blame them at all. I mean, the street cop has been rendered essentially useless at no fault of their own. They get involved in the most justifiable use of force, and their admin is going to throw them under the bus, walk away from them. They'll be subject to criminal charges by a county attorney, by a state's attorney general, and then ultimately by the DOJ for civil rights violations. It's like quadruple jeopardy. Now there's some instances in where municipalities are wanting to require cops to carry their own liability insurance. In Minneapolis, there's a new use of force policy that prohibits officers from pulling their gun without writing a report. Now they have to write a use of force report if they just take their gun out of their holster and break leather. Cops are going to be, as a result of these policies, they're going to be put in more dangerous situations. The blood is going to spill from police officers across the nation all over the place because they're second guessing themselves constantly. These policies are meant, they would rather bury a cop than bury a black guy today. And when I say bury a black guy, I don't just mean any black guy. I mean a criminal thug, a rapist, somebody who's wanted for rape, somebody who has warrants for assaulting cops, somebody who has a knife, somebody who is completely out of their mind, who's involved with domestic disputes and has 3 children there. And then they want to blame the cops. In no matter what situation, you saw, Ray, in Minneapolis here just recently, we had a guy who was wanted for murder who put a gun in his mouth and killed himself. This becomes the fault of the police officers, and then they riot and they steal and they burn and they loot and they destroy businesses that are the backbones of our community.
Yeah, they Gucci bag for reparations whenever there's a police shooting or someone kills himself trying to being in police custody. It's absolutely insane. The Jacob Blake case is insane. Everything you said is true on that. He had a knife in his hand, and they noticed it on the passenger side. That's why the witness reports of him, the police saying drop the knife, are accurate. He's taking a car that isn't his. There's a million reasons why that's a good shooting. I used to investigate officer-involved shootings. I had a stint in IA as a detective. I've actually investigated personally homicide, use of force, officer-involved shootings, and all of these would be cleared. You roll it back to Rashard Brooks in Atlanta, same thing. We're coming into a state now where any police shooting equals rioting and protest. It happened in D.C. a couple nights ago. The body cam comes out. The guy's running from the police, faces a cop with a gun, is raising it up above his waist, and they shoot him, and they're rioting. You can't have a much cleaner shooting than that, and it's on video. Police are in an impossible position right now.
Well, that just goes to show you that it's like we talked about earlier in the week. It's not about the black guy that was killed by the white cop. It's not about racial inequality and systemic racism. It's not about that as much as it's about, like you said, Gucci bag for reparations. Again, we see it all the time. We ran into it last week. Folks are looting Minneapolis and posting on their Facebook that they don't give a shit that anybody said the guy killed himself. We say the cops did it, and we're gonna go loot and get some new Jordans and all this other stuff. So it's very sickening, and I don't understand how we got here as a country, to be honest with you.
This is by design.
It's gross.
It's on purpose, and they want to do this up until November 3rd because they want a country in chaos. Andrew Cuomo, the governor in New York, was actually on TV the other day saying, if Trump wants to come back to New York, he better have an army. Listen, you idiot, he does have an army. It's called the United States Army, and he's the commander-in-chief. If I were Trump, what I would do is I would deploy about 30,000 active duty soldiers to New York, and I would go there and deliver a 5-minute speech. I mean, that would be a power move. Obviously, he's not going to do that, but he does have an army. He has a Navy, he has a Marine Corps, he has a Coast Guard, he has a United States Air Force. He's the commander-in-chief. Ray, we've got about a minute left here. I want you to tell people how to find you and where they can listen to your awesome shows.
Sure. You can find me at coffeewithcopsshow.com. That's the weekly live stream we do with the news updates for law enforcement. And then our other podcast and news is at americaskeepers.com, and I appreciate it.
Can we have you back on sometime soon?
anytime. Just let me know. I will be here.
All right. I'm really considering that beers with a bounty hunter thing.
Yeah.
That sounds like a great idea. I think it's needed. I think that conversation needs to happen.
Ray Dietrich, former cop, 20 years of law enforcement experience. His mission is to give a voice to police officers who can't speak on their own. Make sure that you get over there and watch Coffee with a Cop. You can find him at coffeewithcopshow.com and americaskeepers.com. Coming up in the second segment, another cop. We're a little bit law enforcement heavy here today, Rich. I like it.
Well, hey, it is what it is, man.
We're going to talk about an officer-involved shooting that took place in front of a bunch of people inside of a Walmart. It's coming up in the second half. PC Radio, straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
We will force votes.
We will not stop.
Any Republican senator is part of the cover-up.
What the f***?
Impeachment.
This is madness.
The PC Radio Show with Stu and Rich. Back in a minute.
Hey, it's Stu Peters and Richard Leonard on behalf of Adjust Today Chiropractic. A brand new sponsor, Richard, on PC Radio. Dr. Dustin Dukart, located in St. Paul Park, Minnesota. So if you're here in the People's Republic of Communist Minnesota and you happen to be in the Twin Cities metropolitan area, go on down to St. Paul Park and see Dr. Dustin Dukart. They're only 1 minute off of Highway 61. Now, Dr. Dustin Dukart over at Adjust Today Chiropractic specializes in automotive accident recovery. A lot of distracted drivers out there. A lot of really crappy drivers out there. It's not hard to hit a deer here in Minnesota either, and those collisions, those accidents can end in injury. And unfortunately, when you do have that injury occur, maybe it doesn't even occur right away. Maybe it is sustained until later in life, and then all of a sudden you start to get achy and you start to get these pains. Being properly adjusted is very important, and nobody does it better than Dr. Dustin Dukart over there in St. Paul Park at Adjust Today Chiropractic. He's currently in network, so if you have insurance with Blue Cross Blue Shield or Health Partners, you're covered over there. And for wellness care, Dr. Dustin is currently offering 25% off initial treatments for anybody who mentions PC Radio. I bet you're excited to get over there, Rich.
Can't wait to see the doc, man.
You know, you were a high school and college football player. Certainly your body has been banged up. Also in your career as a bail enforcement agent, we've been doing a lot of fighting over the years. And we have the aches, we have the pains. Dr. Dustin Dukart can help you. Anything automotive recovery, athletic performance, and pain management. Adjust Today Chiropractic in St. Paul Park, Minnesota. Make sure that you get over there and see him. Adjust Today Chiropractic, an official sponsor of PC Radio.
Broadcasting live from the highest cloud of privileged patriotism. The PC Radio Show is on Mojo 50 Radio.
And this portion of PC Radio brought to you by Adjust Today Chiropractic, South St. Paul. Dr. Dustin Dukart over there. He will take care of you, no doubt. I got to get in for an adjustment, Rich. I mean, you start to get a little bit older, things crack, they do things that they're really just not supposed to do.
Well, you're a young man yet, so I guess even an adjustment for a young man like yourself is needed from time to time.
They do adjustments for infants, for newborns, for toddlers, for all ages, and if you have never being properly aligned is something that in life you have to do it. It alleviate if you suffer from headaches, that can be fixed. I mean, even allergies and stuff like that. These chiropractic medicine is probably one of the most underrated forms of treatment for so many different things. You got to get in there and see him, Dr. Dustin Dukart, Adjust Today Chiropractic in South St. Paul. I'm going to bring you to a video here, and if you're watching us on social media, on the OpsLens app, or anywhere else where you can view us do our radio show, I just want to warn you that there is graphic material contained in this particular video. If you're listening to us on iHeartRadio, Mojo 50 Radio, I'm going to do my best to narrate what we have going on here. The first part of what we're going to hear is pretty self-explanatory. It's a 911 call, and you're going to hear about that. And then I will try to narrate the actual scene as it continues here.
Stop with this subject. He's in the store right now. I mean, he's trying to leave the store, but he has a bat. He has a bat with him, and he has it in the air, and he's threatening to hit an associate with it.
Okay. And did he actually leave the store yet?
No, he didn't leave the store yet.
What race is he, and what does he look like?
He's African American. He's African American. He's kind of skinny.
How old does he look?
This is in San Leandro, California, in Alameda County, by the way.
Late 20 and mid 30.
What color shirt and pants does he have on?
He has on black pants.
Okay.
And black shirt.
What color shirt, sir?
Black shirt.
So he's inside of a Walmart. The 911 call is coming from inside of a Walmart here, and there's a black suspect who is completely erratic and has a baseball bat in his hands. He's holding it up over his head, and the 911 caller, I'm not sure if it's an employee that works there or if it's a bystander, but they're wanting police there.
In an argument with another customer.
No, he's actually trying to steal something.
Okay. Did he swing the bat at anybody?
No, he just has it in the air right now.
Okay, what is he doing with it?
He's holding it. He's standing posed and he's just holding it. It's like, just.
But it's in a kind of a threatening way?
Yeah, it's in a threatening way.
Okay, so now we're going to go to cell phone video, which was posted on social media. And here's Mr. Taylor. He's wielding a baseball bat. The initial audio and dialogue between the officer was not captured in the first 30 seconds of the body-worn camera video, but here you see the officer, he's putting hands on the bat, trying to get it away, and now there's been some distance created between the two of them. He just tased him. He used a taser, a neuromuscular incapacitation device, which was ineffective. And Taylor is still on his feet. He still has possession of the baseball bat. And now another officer is making entry into the store. Taylor has now been shot. The bat has now been dropped, and now Taylor has been tased again and is down on the ground. Now we're going to go to the body cam footage here for those of you that are viewing us. And remember, in the first 30 seconds of this, we're going to do a split screen so that you can hear the audio. But on these Axon cameras, they don't record audio in the buffering phase for a lot of these cameras, so we're not able to hear it. But you can see in the body cam side on the right-hand side that there is Taylor, and he's physically resisting the officer as he's trying to get the bat away. He's refusing to drop it. And the officer, now he's deployed the taser from his left hand. He does have the gun out in his right hand. And the reason he has the gun out, for those of you who are not law enforcement savvy, is because the bat is a deadly weapon. An officer takes a strike to the head with this thing, and, he could die.
Drop the bat.
How many warnings is he going to need?
Shot fired, shot medical. Sit down.
And then, of course, you can hear the crowd. They're not happy about the fact that Taylor has been shot, and he's there, and he's still alive at that point. They cut the straps on the backpack that he was wearing, and then they place him in handcuffs, which is standard operating procedure. Here to talk to us about this officer-involved shooting, and the reason why we're talking about this today, this occurred back in April, but the reason why we're talking about this today is because Alameda County District Attorney Nancy O'Malley has announced that Officer Fletcher, who was the one there that shot Taylor, has been charged with voluntary manslaughter for Taylor's death. And we often on Fridays bring in Joe the cop. Joe is a 23-year journeyman patrol officer. He's a current police officer working in the United States, which is why we protect his anonymity. I know Joe wishes that he could come out here and show his face because he's tired of this stuff, just like the rest of the world is. And Joe, you're here with us to talk about this. What do you think? Is this a justified shooting? And welcome to PC Radio on this glorious Friday afternoon.
Thanks. I'm glad to join you on Friday again. Yeah, it absolutely is a justified shooting. And you watch the video footage, and you could see exactly why Taylor was shot by Officer Fletcher. Okay, he advances on him with the baseball bat.
Hello.
What? You hear me?
Yeah, we got you, Joe. I don't know what Richard's talking about there. Joe, can you not hear Joe? Or Rich, can you not hear Joe?
He cut out, but I can hear him now. Sorry.
Okay. All right. No problem. Okay. Yeah, Stu, it absolutely is a justified shooting. I think what we're dealing with here is a prosecutor who wants to test a new law, okay, this AB 392 law that changes the police officer's standard for the use of deadly force from reasonable, and that's the verbiage set forth from Graham versus Conner from the Supreme Court. It changes the verbiage from reasonable to necessary. Okay, and I believe that what she's trying to do for entirely political purposes, for racial politics really, is to use this officer as a test case. I don't know how anybody watches this video and cannot see it as a justified shooting. He advanced on Officer Fletcher while brandishing a baseball bat after previously resisting attempts to be disarmed with a baseball bat. It's an open and shut case. It doesn't get more justified than this.
Well, I agree with you, Joe. How many warnings does a person need to comply? I mean, it sounded to me like he got a lot more than he should have.
Well, Rich, technically, police aren't legally required to issue any warnings. I mean, other than, hey, drop the bat. And even that's not a requirement if the person is coming at you with the baseball bat. If you watch the video, and I know you have, you see where he attempted to disarm him of the baseball bat initially. And when that didn't work, the taser deployment was attempted. When the taser deployment failed, as it usually does in these situations, when the taser deployment failed, Taylor then advances on Officer Fletcher with the baseball bat. That's not even in dispute. You could see him advancing with them, advancing on him with the baseball bat. What else do we need here? This is as justified as it gets. This, to me, is the work of another corrupt and malicious prosecutor looking to test the new law on this officer. Now, if you look at the verbiage in AB 392, okay, the use of force by law enforcement for California law enforcement officers, it says it's now got to be necessary, not reasonable. Well, how can you possibly argue that it wasn't necessary? If this is the new standard, how can you possibly argue that it wasn't necessary to shoot a mentally unstable person who is advancing on you with a baseball bat after a failed taser deployment? You can't make that argument, can you?
You say in a message that you sent to me earlier, Joe, it's clear that Taylor was erratic, non-compliant, and combative as he wielded the baseball bat inside of Walmart. It's also clear that Officer Fletcher shot Taylor as Taylor advanced towards him while holding the baseball bat, and this was after another officer attempted to overcome Taylor with a taser deployment, which was unsuccessful. It really doesn't get any more justified than this, and that's what you're echoing here on PC Radio today.
That's exactly what I'm saying here without even reading what I wrote.
The Taylor deal here is, and let's talk about the taser, okay? Neuromuscular incapacitation is oftentimes unsuccessful. I know that because I've deployed tasers and have had them be unsuccessful. A lot of new cops that are just coming out of the academy rely so heavily on that taser that they don't have a plan B. When the thing becomes ineffective, you're really in for the fight of your life because you just shot somebody with something that was ineffective, and that really heightens, that really escalates what's going on here. We've talked in the past that officers are constantly hounded about de-escalation, 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 but you're not there to de-escalate, Joe, as a cop. You're there to enforce and uphold the law.
Well, I'll say this again, and I do believe that de-escalation is one of the verbiage written into this California statute. You know, the whole thing that changes the verbiage from reasonable to necessary. But to what extent? And how do you legally enforce that? At the end of the day, okay, Officer Fletcher was not legally required to deploy a less lethal measure such as a taser, okay? He was not legally required to deploy a taser against a suspect who was armed with a deadly weapon. The fact that he did that shows that he was attempting not to have to use deadly force. And when it became apparent, okay, that the taser was ineffective, as it usually is on mental subjects in these certain situations, when it became apparent that the taser was not effective, and when it became apparent that Taylor was going to continue to advance on Officer Fletcher had no other choice but to use deadly force. So if we want to make the argument between reasonable and necessary, if you say, oh, well, now it has to be necessary, okay, and this hasn't been tested out. I believe this is the first case in California, okay, where it's going to be tested out against an officer since this bill went into effect. This, it became law in 2020. If you want to say, I'll say this again, if you want to say this, it has to be necessary, how do you argue that it wasn't necessary to shoot a mentally ill and violent suspect who is advancing on you with a deadly weapon? If necessary is the verbiage, well, then it certainly fits this situation, doesn't it?
What I wonder what in their mind would have been more necessary? Should the officer have been hit in the head with the baseball bat before they decided to take action? It's
Rich,
unbelievable.
You're talking about district attorneys who just want to use these officers as guinea pigs. Now, I've never really heard of Alameda County District Attorney Nancy O'Malley before. However, in watching this video, it's not even a gray area. When I'm watching this video, it's clear to me that she's trying to use this officer as a guinea pig for the new law. And it's not going to work. And I've talked to California use of force experts. Some of them feel that the new verbiage really changes absolutely nothing, and some of them are a little more cautious. But even at that, there's going to be a host of legal challenges any defense attorney can raise to this, okay? What they did was they made the Graham versus Connor standard more restrictive for California. Mm-hmm. You can tighten the standard in your own state. Individual states can tighten the federal standard. But even with this verbiage, it became absolutely necessary. If you want to use that as a standard now, it still became necessary for him to shoot.
There's a new use of force. There's a new use of force policy that was so proudly introduced by the worthless elected official or elected representative, Mayor Jacob Fry, in our city of Minneapolis. And I'm pretty sure that you've probably tried to get your hands on this. If you haven't gotten a copy of it, Joe, I can get you one because you're a great articulator of everything law enforcement. On the phone with us right now is a 23-year veteran patrol officer who's still currently working in the United States. We refer to him as Joe the Cop to protect his anonymity, to help us break down some of these use of force incidents that take place across the country and to help us understand better from a law enforcement officer's perspective exactly what it is that's happening in America today. The chief of police, the coward, Madaria Arredondo, standing right next to, with his mask on, of course, standing right next to Mayor Jacob Fry at the podium from the Minneapolis mayor's office here when they unveiled this new use of force policy, requires that officers write a use of force report strictly for or simply for removing their firearm from their holster now. They have to do that. Is this kind of stuff going to make officers second guess protecting themselves in America today?
Yeah, I don't know. I've had to write those reports when, I withdrew my file on my service pistol also. So no, it hasn't prevented me because, self-preservation takes over. I think it takes a little bit more than just saying, tell a guy, okay, he has to write a use of force report to put that hesitation in. It starts, quite honestly, Stu, it starts now at the very beginning, the very indoctrination of these new officers' careers in the academy when they say de-escalation, de-escalation, de-escalation. Use force as a last resort. Listen, using force as a last resort is not the legal standard. Last resort is not the legal standard. I'll say it again. The legal standard is Graham versus Connor, reasonable. The actions have to be reasonable. They cannot be judged in hindsight. It has to be the reasonable perspective of the officer at the scene in real time. But here's the thing. When you turn around and you say to new cadets in the academy, de-escalation, be wary of the public, they're watching, okay? Compassion. None of these things are requirements for a police officer. Compassion is not a requirement of a police officer. I'm not saying police officers don't practice compassion. Of course they do.
Right.
But it's not a requirement. In fact, if anything, it's a hindrance, especially in a situation like this. If Officer Fletcher was compassionate, he could have been brained with the baseball bat. He had to do what he had to do, not only to defend himself, but also the public that was nearby. Everything about Taylor tells you that this was an inevitable conclusion. The man, for whatever reason, and I'm not happy that he's dead, but for whatever reason, this man wanted to die. Because who would think, what rational person advances on a person holding a gun, who's holding a gun on him with a baseball bat? The person who's trying to die.
Joe, what this reminds me of, everything that you just said reminds me of our rules of engagement. My first time I went overseas, and they talked about winning over the hearts and minds of these communities in Iraq. And we all looked at each other and went, hearts and minds? Well, who gives a shit about that? We're here to number one, everyone goes home, just like every day you go to work and Stu and I go to work. The goal is that everyone goes home. And it was the higher ups, the leaders were all talking about, hey, make sure you bring some pencils and some candy and all this other stuff to give to the local economy and local community. No, I'm not there to hand out school supplies. And furthermore, it seems to me that the folks that are making these laws and enforcing these laws are folks that have never done the job. And so I find it very hard to believe that as a lawmaker or a mayor, that you can have any kind of opinion about how to conduct yourself in a situation like this, when you have a mentally unstable person who's looking to do to cause harm to you and anybody else around them, and then tell you did it wrong. And then also practice compassion when your life, what is it, life, limb, or eyesight, right? That's what you're there to protect. Well, all of that was in danger, and somebody sitting in an office telling me that I did my job wrong really would rub me the wrong way.
It's
and
infuriating.
Clearly, everybody else who's doing it right. Yeah.
Well, Rich, you brought up a great point. You said mental illness. Okay. This law was passed by the California legislature, right? And I tend to think that looking at some of the laws that they have passed, that mental illness is rampant within the California legislature. So they are generally reflections of people like Stephen Taylor. Okay.
Yeah.
This was going to pass no matter what, because you got to look at what controls the House and the Senate in California, what controls their state government. Right? It's all liberal for the most part. This was a foregone conclusion this would pass. But I am telling you, even with this new law, they don't have a chance of convicting this guy, this Officer Fletcher. It is clear that he had no choice but to fire once he advanced on him. And wait till these defense attorneys get a hold of this, and there's all kinds of legal challenges that they can present here.
Well, we hope that it negatively affects the new law in California, and we hope that the outcome of this says no, this doesn't make any sense, and I hope that they have problems enacting this with officers during justified use of shooting. Listen. You know as well as I do that cops make mistakes. You know as well as I do that there's actually some really terrible cops out there. There's people out there that shouldn't be cops. One of them was here in Minneapolis, who was in the news just briefly. That thing has gone away, but he was a Somali cop by the name of Mohammed Noor, and he shot Justine Damon across his partner negligently. That was a crappy move. That was bad. He got what he deserved, and he presumably, I believe, is in prison now as a result of that. And he didn't exercise judgment or good discretion there when he did that. She was an unarmed woman in an alley that was approaching the car. She had been a 911 caller and called the police there to help her and ended up dying as a result of it. But what I'm getting at here is that Mohammed Noor should have never been in a position to shoot Justine Damon. And that's where we have to look at the command staff and the politicians and the admin that is involved. And the person sitting in the chief's chair at the time was Janae Harteau. And Janae Harteau knew that Mohammed Noor had washed out of FTO on multiple occasions, but she continued to push this guy over and over and over again because he was the Somali golden child and the face of the police department. He was even portrayed before the public with Minneapolis Police Department literature and ads while they were trying to push this narrative of how diverse they were and how Mohammed Noor was going to be policing the Somalis that are inside of the city of Minneapolis over at Cedar Riverside in that community, but then ended up somehow in 5th Precinct or down south there and ended up in an alley in the dark with his partner and Justine Damon, where she ended up dead. This is the fault of the command staff and politicians for pushing this guy who should have never been a cop. And in that situation, you know who I feel most bad for? Obviously, Justine Damon and her family, but I feel really bad for Mohammed Noor because he should have never been in that position. Are we going to see the watering down of requirements and standards for law enforcement officers as time progresses here?
Well, we already saw it with Mohammed Noor. They made a special case of hiring him, and then when this happened, they could not distance themselves from him quickly enough.
Right.
They had indications he wasn't making it, and they pushed him through again because of
race,
diversity.
Yeah,
okay? Diversity for the sake of diversity.
Sure.
I've heard this before. Diversity for the sake of diversity is perversity. Okay, I've heard that before. It's not an original thing. You hired him for diversity. Hey, you can hire a Muslim Somali officer if he's qualified. That's no problem.
Right.
We want that.
Yes.
But evidently there were some qualification issues with him. Now, you said something in this previously here about officers making mistakes. And this goes right into the essence of Graham versus Conner. Graham versus Conner says that your actions have to be reasonable. It doesn't say your actions have to be 100% right. It factors in for the mistakes based on what you believe at the time and what you're seeing. Now, do you know where this new California law, this AB 392 law, came from? It came from a shooting in California in 2018, the Stephon Clark shooting. Are you familiar with it?
I'm not.
Okay. It was a big event. It caused all kinds of riots. Okay. They chased Stephon Clark, a potential burglary suspect and prior convicted felon, into the backyard of, it might have been a family member's yard. He had been a burglary suspect or a break-in suspect. He turned towards the officers, and it's clear on body cam. He turned towards the officers holding a dark object in his hand, pointing at them, taking a shooting stance. The officers fatally wounded him. It turned out that object was a cell phone, okay, a black cell phone.
Right.
He did this because he wanted to use the colloquial term, he wanted to commit suicide by cop. Were those officers mistaken that Stephon Clark had a gun? Yes, they were. However, was that mistake reasonable under the totality of circumstances? Absolutely. That's why they were not able to prosecute those officers. So it was that incident that pushed, as I will call them, the anti-police thugs, because they want to destroy law enforcement, discredit it, no matter how justified the officers were in their actions, that caused them to push for this AB 392. Now, here's the ironic part in all that, Stu. The ironic part is that even if that law had been in effect in 2018, the same circumstances, given the same circumstances, even if you want to use the necessary standard, would the shooting have still been justified? Absolutely, 100%. Because is it absolutely necessary for a police officer to use deadly force against a suspect whom he believes is pointing a gun at him in the dark? Yes, it is. So even then, these officers wouldn't have been able to be charged. That's the irony of this, that these people don't understand. That they're not smart enough to understand this. This is why I'm saying that this law is mostly feel-good language. It doesn't change a whole lot.
You know, talking about all of this this morning and this afternoon is really making me think and wonder, what is it that these anti-cop folks, what is their end game? What is it that they really want to see? I mean, you want to push out all the good cops and prosecute them and put them in prison. What is it that what's the end game? Can it all really just be because Donald Trump is president? Maybe it can. I don't know about that, but it's really astounding to me that any of this is really going on. I don't know. It's
Rich. The end game is, and I've stated this many times, the end game is they want the dismantling of law enforcement, okay, so that they can do what they want to do. They don't care about the rights of others or the lives of others. They want to be free to do what they want to do. This is an agenda with them, and they are aided in this agenda, I should point out, by cowardly police chiefs who keep their heads down and don't stand up to them and say, no, what you want is anarchy. We're not going to tolerate that. When you come to our town, we're not going to let you block traffic. We're not going to let you attack other motorists. Look what what that Ohio sheriff just said on the news recently when he says, you shoot at my guys, we're going to shoot back. You throw stuff at us, you throw Molotov cocktails at us, we're going to shoot you. Okay? Yeah. I'll guarantee you this, Rich. They're not going to go protest in that county because they know what their limits are. But this whole thing, you're talking about a group of thugs who have no power whatsoever, but certain chiefs have granted them this power by not standing up to them, by not correcting them, by not addressing their lies. All right?
Well, they've actually started to they've actually started to weaponize law enforcement now against people who don't believe in a particular ideology or a political stance. They're actually we saw evidence of that in Kenosha, Wisconsin, as a 17-year-old teen has now been arrested and charged with premeditated first-degree capital murder or whatever their charge is there in Wisconsin. Kyle Rittenhouse is facing life in prison over there as a result of his defense of his own self after he was attacked by a mob of criminal rioters from Black Lives Matter and Antifa. It was only after he was smashed in the head with a skateboard and had a gun pointed at his head that he did the job that the cops should have done by protecting people. He didn't carelessly and recklessly fire rounds into a crowd. 100% of his rounds landed on their intended target. The guy, he presented himself as an experienced stress shooter. Joe the Cop, we'll have you again next Friday. Thank you so much for being here.
Joe.
Thank you, guys.
So the weaponization of law enforcement continues in America. The civil unrest continues in America. The lawlessness from the leftist progressives and the liberal radicals continues in America, all while we come up on the elections. Richard, real quick, your last word of the day.
Hopefully next week will be a lot brighter.
All right. I hope everybody has a good weekend. Thanks a lot for joining us here on Patriotically Correct Radio. It always goes way too fast. Until Monday, here's what's up to it. Here's what's down to it. Here's to any way we can get to it. Here's to those that don't do it. May they be dragged to it, tied to it, or forced to it. And here's to us who do it, because we're the ones that's used to it.
Twitter blew up. More offensive than a presidential tweet.
Russia, China, Japan, Mexico, all countries will respect us far more than they do under past administrations.
PC Radio with Stu and Rich. Mojo 50 Radio.